My mother-in-law grabbed the microphone at my wedding reception and announced to 200 guests that she'd paid for everything because her son married a broke girl with no class. The room went silent, forks frozen midair, champagne glasses hovering near lipsticked mouths. What nobody knew, not even my husband sitting beside me with his face turning red, was that I'd written the check that paid for his mother's mortgage 3 weeks ago, and the woman she just called my boss actually reported to me every Monday morning. Before I tell you how one sentence at my wedding destroyed a woman's entire world, tell me, have you ever stayed quiet while someone humiliated you, knowing that the truth would hurt them more than any comeback ever could? My name is Elena Vasquez, and the day I married Daniel Whitmore, I'd been keeping secrets for 2 years. Not the kind that destroy marriages, but the kind that protect them. Daniel knew I worked in tech. He knew I did well. What he didn't know was that doing well meant I'd gone from junior developer to majority stakeholder in a company worth $40 million. I never told him because I needed to know he loved me, not my bank account. Turns out I should have been more worried about his mother. Patricia Whitmore was old money that had gone stale, the kind of woman who wore pearls to the grocery store and introduced herself with her maiden name first. She lived in a Victorian house in Portland's West Hills that looked impressive from the outside, but had a second mortgage she could barely afford. I knew, because I'd seen the paperwork when I bought it. The first time I met Patricia, she looked me up and down like I was a piece of furniture she was considering for her guest room and ultimately rejecting. "So you work in computers," she said, the word computers dripping with the same disdain she might reserve for sanitation. Daniel squeezed my hand under the table, but I just smiled. I'd grown up in a neighborhood where people judged you by how loud your car was, not how quiet your money was. I could handle Patricia Whitmore. What I couldn't handle was how she treated Daniel. Every phone call was a reminder that he'd never quite lived up to her expectations. Every family dinner included a story about his cousin who went to Yale or his childhood friend who was now a surgeon. Daniel would smile through it, but I saw how his shoulders tensed, how he'd go quiet on the drive home. That's when I started planning. 6 months before our wedding, Patricia mentioned she was having cash flow issues. She didn't ask for help directly because women like Patricia don't ask. They mention problems and wait for solutions to arrive. Daniel immediately offered to postpone the wedding, to help with her mortgage. I watched him volunteer to sacrifice our happiness for a woman who'd never once told him he was enough. That night, I made some calls. By morning, I'd had my attorney purchase Patricia's mortgage through a shell company. The terms were generous. Interest rate dropped by 2 points, payments reduced. She never knew who her new lender was. She just knew that suddenly she could breathe again. And she could afford to throw herself the kind of wedding that would impress her country club friends. "I insist on paying for the wedding," she told Daniel over brunch 2 weeks later. "It's tradition for the groom's family to host, and I won't have people thinking we can't afford a proper celebration." Daniel looked at me, uncertain. I smiled and squeezed his hand. "That's incredibly generous, Patricia. Thank you." What she didn't know was that I'd already paid for everything. The venue at Chateau Bellevue, the Michelin-starred catering, the orchestra, the flowers, all of it. When the vendors sent her the invoices marked paid in full, she assumed it was a courtesy, a professional courtesy for such a large wedding. She bragged to her friends about her connections, her ability to negotiate, her refined taste. I let her have it. I let her believe she was the hero of this story. The wedding planning became Patricia's personal stage. She invited her friends to dress fittings I didn't need them at. She held committee meetings about centerpieces. She sent Daniel's sister Margaret with opinions about my dress, my hair, my choice to keep my last name hyphenated. Every meeting, every call, every decision was an opportunity for her to remind everyone that this wedding existed because of her generosity. Daniel noticed. "I'm sorry," he said one night, both of us exhausted after another 4-hour venue walkthrough that Patricia had insisted on. "She's a lot. We can scale everything back. We don't need all this." I turned to face him in the darkness of our apartment. "Do you love me?" "More than anything," he said without hesitation. "Then let your mother have her party. We'll have our marriage." What I didn't tell him was that I was documenting everything. Every condescending comment Patricia made to vendors about the bride's limited budget. Every time she told someone I was lucky, her son was generous enough to overlook my background. Every instance where she claimed credit for choices I'd made. My assistant Jade, who Patricia thought was my supervisor, kept meticulous notes. Jade Park was the chief operating officer of Tech Vista Solutions, the company I'd co-founded with my college roommate Marcus. She was brilliant, Korean-American, Stanford MBA, and she'd been watching Patricia with the kind of quiet fury reserved for women who'd spent their lives being underestimated by people like her. "When are you going to tell Daniel?" Jade asked me one afternoon, 3 weeks before the wedding. "Tell him what?" "That you're not just a senior developer, that you own 60% of this company, that the boss he thinks you have is actually your employee." I stared out my office window at the Seattle skyline. Tech Vista occupied 4 floors of this building. We had 300 employees. Last quarter's revenue was $50 million. "After the wedding," I said, "I need to know he married me, not my portfolio." Jade sighed. "And Patricia? When does she find out?" I smiled. "When it matters most." The wedding day arrived wrapped in September sunshine. Chateau Bellevue looked like something out of a French countryside dream, all ivy-covered stone and manicured gardens overlooking the Columbia River. The guests arrived in their silk and summer suits, air-kissing and admiring the floral arrangements that had cost more than most people's cars. Patricia held court near the entrance, accepting compliments like a queen receiving tribute. "Yes, I planned every detail myself," I heard her tell a cluster of her country club friends. "The girl has no family to speak of, so of course it fell to me to ensure Daniel had the wedding he deserved." I watched from the bridal suite window as my mother adjusted my veil. Mom had flown in from Miami, proud and trying not to cry. She'd raised me and my 2 brothers in a cramped apartment while working 2 jobs. She'd taught me that dignity wasn't about the size of your house, but the size of your heart. "Mija," she said softly, "are you sure about this family?" I kissed her cheek. "I'm sure about Daniel. The rest, we'll handle." The ceremony was perfect. Daniel cried when I walked down the aisle. His vows were simple and true. Mine were too, though I left out the part about how I'd secretly been protecting his family's finances for half a year. When the officiant pronounced us married and Daniel kissed me, I heard Patricia sniffle behind us. For a moment, I almost felt guilty about what was coming. The reception started smoothly. Dinner was served, champagne flowed, speeches began. Daniel's best friend told embarrassing college stories. My brother made everyone laugh with tales of me as a bossy 7-year-old. Margaret gave a sweet toast about gaining a sister. Then Patricia stood up. She didn't ask for the microphone. She simply walked to where the bandleader stood and took it. The room quieted, expecting a mother's tender words about her son's happiness. "I want to take a moment," Patricia began, her voice carrying across the room with practiced clarity, "to talk about what marriage really means. It means family. It means sacrifice. It means—" She paused, looking directly at me. "It means generosity from those who have the means to give." I felt Daniel tense beside me. I put my hand on his knee, calm. When Daniel told me he wanted to marry Elena, I'll admit I had my concerns. She comes from such a different background. Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. But I told myself, love is what matters, and if my son loves her, then I'll do what any good mother would do. I'll make sure they start their life together with dignity. My mother's hand found mine under the table. I squeezed it gently. "So I want everyone to know," Patricia continued, her voice rising with pride, "that I paid for this entire wedding. Every flower, every meal, every moment of beauty you see here today. Because my son married a broke girl with no family money and no class, and I couldn't bear to see him start his marriage with a cheap, embarrassing celebration that reflected poorly on the Whitmore name. The room didn't just go quiet. It went dead. 200 people stopped moving, stopped breathing. Daniel's face went from red to white. Margaret gasped. Someone dropped a fork, the clang echoing off the stone walls. Patricia stood there, smiling, completely unaware that she'd just detonated a bomb in her own life. I should have been angry. I should have been humiliated. Instead, I felt a strange calm, the kind that comes right before you speak a truth that will change everything. Then Jade stood up. Elegant in her navy dress, hair pulled back in a sleek bun, she walked with CEO confidence toward the band area. "Excuse me, Patricia," she said, her voice polite but firm. "May I?" Patricia, surprised but still riding her wave of self-satisfaction, handed over the microphone. Jade turned to face the crowd, and I saw the slight smile on her face, the one she wore in board meetings right before she made a move that checkmated the competition. "I'm Jade Park, and Patricia just called me Elena's boss." She paused, letting that sink in. "That's interesting, because Elena owns 60% of Tech Vista Solutions, the company where I work. As Chief Operating Officer, I report to her every Monday morning." The silence somehow got deeper. "And that mortgage on your beautiful house in West Hills, Patricia? The one that was restructured 6 months ago with such favorable terms? That was Elena, too. She bought your debt through Vasquez Holdings to help you out without embarrassing you. She's been paying your property taxes as well, quietly. Because that's the kind of person she is." Patricia's face cycled through expressions so fast it was almost cinematic. Confusion, disbelief, horror, and finally, a sickly pale understanding. "Oh, and this wedding?" Jade continued, her voice steady and clear. "Elena paid for every single thing. The vendors sent you paid-in-full invoices because she'd already written the checks. She let you think you'd done this, let you take credit, let you feel generous, because she loves your son enough to protect your dignity." Daniel turned to me, his eyes wide with shock and something else, something that looked like awe. "Elena," he whispered. I leaned close to him, my voice low enough that only he could hear. "Surprise, mi amor. And also, I bought your mom's house last month. The bank was going to foreclose. She doesn't know yet." Jade handed the microphone back to the band leader, smiled at me, and returned to her table. The room stayed frozen for another 3 heartbeats. Then Marcus Chen, my co-founder and Tech Vista's CTO, stood up with his champagne glass raised. "To Elena," he said loudly, "the smartest person I've ever met, who built a company from nothing, who never forgot where she came from, and who had the grace to let someone who insulted her believe they were being generous. Welcome to the family, Patricia. You have no idea how lucky you are." People began to clap, slowly at first, then louder. My mother was crying, smiling through tears. Daniel's hand found mine under the table, shaking. Patricia just stood there, the microphone hanging forgotten in her hand, her entire worldview crumbling in real time. Margaret rushed to her mother's side, pulling her gently back to their table. I stood up, smoothing my dress, and walked to where Patricia sat. The room went quiet again. Everyone watched as I knelt beside her chair, my wedding dress pooling on the floor. "Patricia," I said quietly, just loud enough for our nearby tables to hear. "I didn't do any of this to embarrass you. I did it because I love your son, and your problems were causing him pain. The house, the wedding, the mortgage, that was never about you owing me. That was about family taking care of family." She looked at me, tears streaking her makeup, and for the first time since I'd met her, Patricia Whitmore had no words. I continued, my voice gentle but firm. "But you need to know something. I grew up with a single mother who worked 2 jobs. I put myself through college. I built my company from a garage startup. And not once did anyone in my family or my life measure my worth by my bank account. They measured it by my character. I stood up, looked down at her, and said the thing I'd been wanting to say for 2 years. You judged me from the moment we met. You decided I wasn't good enough because I didn't come from your world. But here's the truth, Patricia. I didn't need your world. I built my own. And I was kind enough to let you live in yours without knowing I was the one holding it up. I turned to Daniel, who stood with tears in his eyes. I'm sorry I didn't tell you everything. I needed to know you loved me for me. I hope you understand. He pulled me into his arms, his voice breaking. You paid my mother's mortgage? You let her humiliate you, knowing the whole time? I let her have her moment, I said. I just didn't expect her to choose this one. The reception continued, though the energy had shifted into something surreal. People approached me with new eyes, asking questions about Tech Vista, about my company, about how I'd built it all. Patricia left early with Margaret, her head down, her armor finally cracked. Daniel's father, who'd been quiet through the whole thing, shook my hand as he left. My wife needed that wake-up call, he said simply. Thank you for being kinder to her than she deserved. Later, when the guests had gone and it was just Daniel and me swaying on the empty dance floor, he asked the question I'd been waiting for. Why didn't you tell me? I looked up at him, at the man I loved enough to hide my success from. Because everyone in my life changed when they found out about the money. Friends asked for loans. Dates saw dollar signs. I needed you to love Elena, the girl from Miami who loved coding and terrible coffee and your terrible jokes. Not Elena, the tech CEO. He kissed my forehead. I love you so much it terrifies me. The money, the company, the fact that you apparently own my childhood home, none of that matters. But Elena? He pulled back to look at me. No more secrets. We're partners now. Equal partners. I smiled. Equal partners. Though technically, I own 60% of our partnership. He laughed, the sound echoing off the stone walls, and we danced until the staff started cleaning up around us. 3 weeks later, Patricia called. I let it go to voicemail twice before Daniel convinced me to answer. I owe you an apology, she said without preamble. Not just for the wedding, for everything. I was cruel because I was scared. Scared I was losing my son. Scared I couldn't keep up the image I'd built my entire life around. Scared that someone who didn't come from my world would take away the only thing I had left. I let the silence sit for a moment. Patricia, you never lost Daniel. You just never realized he didn't need saving from me. He needed saving from your expectations. I know that now, she said quietly. Margaret showed me the paperwork. You own my house. You could evict me tomorrow. I could, I agreed. But I won't. The mortgage terms stand. The house is yours as long as you want it. That's not a transaction, Patricia. That's family. She started crying then, real tears, not the delicate dabbing she did at charity luncheons. Why would you do that after what I said? Because Daniel loves you, and I love Daniel. And maybe, if you're willing, you and I can start over. No more assumptions. No more measuring worth by bank accounts or last names. Just 2 women who both want the best for the same man. I'd like that, she whispered. It took time. Patricia didn't transform overnight into a warm, accepting mother-in-law. But slowly, she started asking about my work, about my mother, about my brothers. She started saying our family instead of the Whitmore family. And 6 months later, when I told her I was pregnant, she cried and hugged me for the first time without stiffness. Daniel and I moved into a house in Portland with a view of Mount Hood. Not the biggest house we could afford, but one that felt like home. Some Saturday mornings, Patricia comes over for coffee. We don't talk about the wedding. We don't need to. 1 year after that wedding, Jade sent me a video. Someone had been recording when Patricia grabbed the microphone. The video had been posted online with the caption, "Rich Mill learns broke bride is actually rich." It had 15 million views. In the comments, thousands of people shared their own stories about being underestimated, about staying quiet while people judged them, about the satisfaction of truth revealing itself. Daniel watched it with me, both of us curled on our couch. "Do you regret how it happened?" he asked. I thought about it, really thought about it. "No," I said finally. "She needed to learn that lesson, and honestly, so did I." "What lesson did you learn?" I kissed him, feeling our baby kick between us. That hiding who you are to protect yourself isn't the same as being humble. I should have told you everything from the start. Not because of the money, but because partners don't keep secrets, even kind ones. He smiled. "So, no more secrets?" "Well," I said, pulling up an email on my phone, "there is one thing. Tech Vista just got acquired by a Fortune 500 company. The deal closes next month. We're looking at about $200 million. His eyes went wide. $200 million. Your broke wife just became very not broke. He laughed until he cried, and we held each other on that couch, two people who'd found each other despite the noise and expectations and secrets. Two people who had learned that love isn't about where you come from or how much you have. It's about whether you choose to build something together, even when the world tries to tear you apart. Patricia called the next morning. "Margaret just told me about the acquisition. I'm happy for you, Elena." "Thank you, Patricia." "And Elena? I'm sorry it took me so long to see what my son saw all along. You were never the one who wasn't good enough. I was." After we hung up, I looked at Daniel sleeping beside me, at the house we'd built together, at the life we were creating. They say money can't buy happiness. They're right. But it can buy you the power to be kind, to protect the people you love, to show grace to those who've shown you none. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, it can buy you a moment at your own wedding where you stay quiet, let someone embarrass themselves, and then watch as the truth does all the talking for you. If you've ever been underestimated by someone who should have known better, you're not alone. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's simply letting the truth speak for itself and having the grace to help pick up the pieces afterward.